Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. Guys, I have not booked a guest as fast as today's guest. We have Laura Delano with us. Her book is called Unshrunk, A Story of Psychiatric Treatment Resistance. And for those who don't know about the book, when I heard about it, I'm like, I got to get you on right away because one of the things that's a big undercurrent in our culture is how over-medicated everyone is, how quick people are to put psychiatrists, shrinks to put people on mind-altering medication. And there's this like vague understanding that, maybe we don't really know how all this stuff works. And, instead of throwing a pill at something, let's look at the causes or things like that. You had a decades-long nightmare situation having to deal with being effectively a guinea pig. So I want to talk to you about, because again, this is something that I think a lot of people have vague feelings about, but they're not that informed. And I'm going to come at it from a personal perspective for I let you speak. In May, I got diagnosed with sleep apnea. And one of the symptoms I had was I was waking up every day with high anxiety, because if all night you're being choked, you're going to be in fight or flight and you're going to wake up anxious. And how anxiety works is the body feels the anxiety and the mind finds a rationalization for it. So I was getting all sorts of cognitive problems, so on and so forth. I was having problems breathing, which meant I was having problems speaking. And then I was having problems thinking because I'm not getting enough sleep, right? So then I'm anxious about how am I going to work? If I'm not quick and if I can't talk, I don't have a job. If I went to a shrink, I'm sure 9 times out of 10, I would have been on some anti-anxiety medication right now. So now I'm on an anti-anxiety, which is numbing me. I'm also not getting sleep still. I'm still going to have those cognitive issues. I'm still going to have the physical issues of speaking. And then there's going to be something else. So instead of being like, okay, let's look at your diet. What are you eating that's maybe inflammatory? Let's look at your sleep. You need sleep to think. I'm going to be doped up, and it's going to become this self-perpetuating cycle. And it's very scary to me to think about there's people like that who, if I'd have been another person, I don't know where I'd be today. And this is only 3 months later, excuse me. So I'm going to stop talking. But can you please give the audience a little bit of background about how all this stuff happened to you?
Sure. And thanks so much for having me. I responded just as fast to your invitation to come on. So, yeah, so it's great to be here. And yeah, the way I describe it is that I had a 14-year relationship with the American mental health industry and then realized it was nearly killing me and
Yeah.
decided to break up with it. That's the kind of the elevator um, pitch of it. And it began when I was a kid. I was this 13-year-old girl. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, so this affluent
Boy, yeah.
hometown, a lot of pressures, expectations, everything looked perfect on the outside, very much Stepford Wives vibe. And I happened to be a kid who was good at school, quote unquote. And so
Sure.
I looked like I had it all together on paper, and ended up having this profound experience in front of the bathroom mirror one night when I lost touch with my body. I lost touch with space and time. I was just staring at this girl in front of the mirror. It was a stranger. I didn't know who she was. And when I came back into myself after this terrifying, disorienting experience, the only way I could make sense of what had just happened was that I must not have a real self. I must be this fake robot programmed to perform. But who am I and what do I care about? And so that experience really, fucked me up internally. And I
Yeah.
didn't tell anyone, and I pretended it didn't happen, and I continued on the little good student and good athlete and all that. But internally, I was just falling more and more apart, and I began acting out at home and yelling and screaming and cursing and hitting. And my parents didn't know what to do with me
Wait,
and got really scared.
can we talk about this? Because that's got to be on some level confusing to you, because on one level you're perfect at school, on the other level you're acting out. So like you're both the good girl and the bad girl, like archetype.
Oh, yeah,
Was that something that internally you were like, what's going on? Who am I?
totally. I mean, I in retrospect, I see that my acting out was an attempt to feel like I had some power here
Yeah, yeah.
because I felt so powerless. I realized there are all these kind of broader social sources of power that are controlling me and how I behave and how I act. And so the only way I could think to kind of exert my own power was to be angry about it and to express that anger. And I only expressed it at home. I still kept it together outside of the home. So I was totally compartmentalized, and I think that compartmentalization ended up, just not being sustainable.
Yeah.
And so my poor parents eventually were just so confused and scared, and probably, drained and exhausted, that they decided to send me to a mental health professional. And this was in the mid 90s. So I'm 42 now. So back then, the mid 90s was the just to step back for a minute and think about what was happening here culturally. So the 90s were the decade of the brain. Our government officially made this declaration: we're going to discover all the uncharted territories of the brain and conquer it, and blah, blah, blah. And so it was within that context that very well orchestrated efforts by drug companies, in large part, were underway to kind of infiltrate the cultural milieu with ideas about, mental illness and mental health awareness, and fighting the stigma of mental illness, and just kind of making this medicalized language of illness and health and symptom very much a normal, ubiquitous even part
Yes.
of life. And so that was happening. That was really taking off in the 90s as I was having this crisis. And what was also taking off in the 90s was a very small number of key opinion leader psychiatrists, mostly in Boston, affiliated with Harvard Medical School, and very esteemed doctors, who were getting drug company money to basically expand market share into children,
Right.
specifically juvenile bipolar diagnosis. This was the big fad at the time. And what they said was, we have this epidemic of undiagnosed bipolar disorder in children. And the reason we haven't recognized it until now is because mania looks different in kids than it does in adults. In adults, you think you're Jesus Christ, you have delusions of grandeur, you're
Oh,
racing thoughts, all of
wait,
that.
wait. Did you just diagnose me? Sorry.
Michael, I have no doubt you meet the criteria for numerous diagnoses.
I thought that. I thought until I visited an actual sociopath in jail, Michael Alec, the murderer, and then you realize that the line between, oh, I read this in WebMD, this sounds like me, and someone who actually has some of these conditions is not thin at all. It's like, oh, this is not just, oh, I've got a lot of energy sometimes. This is a
Oh
whole
yeah.
other thing. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
we all have the capacity to go mad, for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh, sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what these powerful doctors basically said was, unlike, those grandiose, delusions that adults have, manic children are irritable, angry, they're having outbursts.
They're teenagers.
That's mania in children.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, hello, there I was, like, fuck you, mom. I fucking hate you. And
Yeah.
fuck you, family. And fuck you, Greenwich, Connecticut. I was just like acting out. I was cutting myself. I was, just a maniac. And so, of course, I was going to get that label. And that's what I got in the span of one session with a psychiatrist. I was eventually sent from a therapist to a psychiatrist. One session, I was told I had this incurable illness called bipolar disorder, but don't worry, there are medications that will help you manage it. I was
Well,
fucking 14 at that time.
it's just kind of chilling to hear this because there's a couple of things that come to mind. I've said recently, and I've had very little pushback, that it's far more likely we're moving toward Brave New World than 1984. And the mechanism of control in Brave New World is everyone's just always doped to the gills and lives on this moment-to-moment pleasure principle. And I'm sure whatever, there are plenty of pills, I'm just sure, I don't even know what the names are, but if someone is acting up and you kind of give them this, they'll be numb. So in a way it will work, air quotes, but what does that mean for the, in this case, teen who's getting that medication?
I love that you're bringing this up, and I completely agree. And I think this question of work is such an important
Right.
one, because the conventional assumption in our culture is that if you are, feeling really depressed, unmotivated, you can't get out of bed, blah, 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 you have something wrong with your brain. You have a chemical imbalance, you have faulty biomarkers, something's awry biochemically. And this drug is a so-called treatment, like a medicine, a medication that's treating this illness in your brain. And so that medicalized framework creates this illusion, really, that it's just about tinkering with your chemistry, and that's going to help you feel better. But in truth, these are psychoactive chemicals that aren't really any different than alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, other than their legal status and the fact that we call them medication. And so when you are thinking about them in this medicalized way, it really prevents you from having an informed understanding of how these drugs work. But when, like you're explaining, when you're taking a tranquilizer, it's going to suppress your emotions. It's going to slow you down. That might feel helpful given what you're going through, but it's not treating an illness. So I think for me, that's where the nuance comes in, because just to be clear for your audience, like, I'm not anti these drugs. What I'm against is preventing people from making informed choices about them. And to make an informed choice, you have to have language that's common sense, straightforward, that's not marketing spin like the word antidepressant is. But no, this is a serotonergic drug that's interfering with your serotonin system, among other systems. And that interference might create results that feel helpful, at least in the short term, but it's not treating an illness. I think that's where the key shift needs to be.
I'm going to disagree slightly, because alcohol and some of these other things have been around for thousands of years across hundreds of cultures, whereas a lot of these pills are novelties and have only been around for a few minutes. If you ask people, anyone, even professionals, do we have a thoroughgoing understanding of how the brain works in causing cognition? Everyone say, of course not. This is a very new science, so on and so forth. But they're acting as if it's basically like, okay, I have a wound, I put a Band-Aid, then the cells stitch together, then you get a scab and the scab falls off. It's not this ABC situation at all. The brain is such a complex thing, and such an individually complex thing. And it's also for people to help them understand how the good way to think about it is, if you take melatonin, you will be unconscious for 8 hours, but you're not getting sleep. You'll just be unconscious. So you wake up all groggy. So yes, in a sense that if you have insomnia, you can take melatonin, but that's not solving the problem. You're still not getting your deep sleep. So like in these cases, like, okay, this one symptom is getting resolved, but you're not addressing the root cause. And
Totally.
And everything's going to have a cost when you're dealing with the mind.
Totally. And I do think we have been so desensitized to critical thinking about pills. And we're one of 2 countries in the world that allows direct to consumer advertising. I think 1 in 3, it's probably even higher at this point, but 1 in 3 Americans take some kind of pharmaceutical drug. 1 in 4 nearly takes a psychiatric drug.
Is that true?
Yep. Almost 1 in 4 is 23 something percent, according to 2022 CDC numbers, are on at least 1 psychiatric drug. So it's probably even higher now. So it's just ubiquitous. And we are so desensitized to, the soporific voice at the end of the drug commercial.
Yeah, right.
Like, and I was that way myself. And during the decade and a half that I was engaged with all of these drugs and diagnoses that all these well-meaning doctors prescribed me, I never once, until the very end, of course, as I go into in my book, I never once stepped back to ask any questions about any of it. I just took for granted that if a doctor is giving me this and telling me this, it must be helpful and it must be true, because I'm not a doctor.
Sure, right.
Yeah, but and I think a lot of us are like that.
But you said well-meaning, and I don't think that doctors are malevolent or shrinks are malevolent by and large, but I do think there is often a sense of laziness that, instead of like, let's sit down and work at things and like, okay, what's going on here? It's just like, let's just try this. And if that doesn't work, we'll try this, try that. But these things are just, I think it would take a minute before you're going to put someone on something this powerful and so intense. One would hope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think the incentive structures are all aligned against that slower, longer, exploratory kind of relationship that you might, hope that someone would have with their psychiatrist, with their shrink. And, I think in the earlier days of modern psychiatry, and I go into this in the Unshrunk because I was fascinated by, what led us here?
Yeah.
What has happened in psychiatry over the past 100 years that's led us to this point where where psychiatrists are, for the most part, operating with like one tool in their toolbox here, which is the prescription pad, is it wasn't always like this. And psychoanalysis, of course, in up until the mid 20th century was the predominant method that psychiatrists used to help people. And then efforts really beginning in the mid 50s, really taking off in the mid 50s, efforts were underway to kind of redefine psychiatry as a medical profession. We're medical doctors, we use medical treatments. And here we are now, 70 years later, and there are few psychiatrists who actually, do deep therapy with people. And I don't blame them for that. I think the system is set up, the system itself makes it hard for them to do anything else. And you can have a 3 15-minute med appointments in an hour and bill 3 people, or have one long psychotherapy appointment and you get you bill just a third. I mean, I get why doctors tend to pick the former.
And also, if it's this pervasive, I can't really be blamed. I'm just doing what is best practices, what every single one of my colleagues are doing. And in fact, if I am going to be that, tall poppy, sticking my head up and being like, hey guys, maybe this isn't the right approach, especially when we're dealing with kids and teens where their brains are changing so quickly and their hormones and so on and so forth. I'm probably going to be the target. I'm going to be a troublemaker instead of someone to listen to.
Totally. The risk of liability, falling
yeah.
outside the standard of care, it's huge. It's real. And I get it. And I hear from psychiatrists all the time, especially since my book came out, who identify so much with the points I'm making in my book and say, I feel scared to help my patients taper off or to push back. I could lose my job or, have someone sue me. And so until those liability obstacles are also changed so that doctors feel more courageous in sticking their heads out, I think it's going to be hard to get ourselves out of this mess. And just this whole topic of standard of care, like since my book came out in March, and I've been really fascinated by how much the corporate media has been talking about it.
Sure.
And some of it's been positive, as to be expected. Some of it's been outraged, especially like I'm thinking about this one Washington Post review of my book.
Okay.
And the writer, the freelancer, she was like just the vitriolic about me writing about my own experiences of basically rejecting psychiatry standard of care, calling me dangerous. That's been one of the main attacks on me, is that I'm dangerous, that me sharing my own story is dangerous.
But it is dangerous to her, because I'm confident that this is someone who's doped to the gills. And if they have to take a step back and look, wait a minute, maybe I've been on this long road since I was 16. That's some difficult questions a lot of people don't want to ask. I mean, I think the odds of someone who's a book reviewer for the Washington Post having SSRI eyes and glazed over is quite literally 100%.
Yeah. And I think what hurts my heart is that I recognize that. I do think the people who read corporate media are the people who need to hear my story the most, because I do think a lot of them are psychiatrized, as I like to put it. Yeah. And what I think gets lost is the nuance here. Like I was saying before, this is not about being pro psych drug or anti psych drug. I'm neither of those things. For me personally, I'll never take one of these drugs again, but who am I to think I know what someone else should or shouldn't do? I want my experiences that I talk about in the book to be a cautionary tale, especially for parents of struggling teens, because I do think my story is happening at scale right now. I think, and what I basically mean by that is I am a story of someone who turned to the mental health system for help and ended up being harmed much more than helped, but didn't recognize this until the end, because with each passing year, just to jump back to, what was set off when I was 14, I did eventually buy into this idea that I was sick, quote unquote. I rejected it at first. Like when that psychiatrist told me you're bipolar, I knew this is bullshit. Like there's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong is this environment I'm in and all these pressures and the fact that none of it has any meaning. And this is, who cares about grades on a page? But I lost touch with that wisdom eventually. And I did buy into this idea that my emotional pain and my racing thoughts and my deep kind of fears and all of that were, symptoms of this illness. And I bought into it deeply. And I was this good patient for a decade straight. And with each passing year that I was compliant and took my meds and got lots of therapy and, eventually needed to go into programs and hospitals and just more and more and more treatment, the more dysfunctional and fucked up and miserable I got. And I was being told every step of the way, your illness is progressing. This is why you're getting worse. Never mind that I was on, 2 meds, then 3 meds, then 4, then 5. I was literally on 5 different psych meds, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, benzos, antidepressants. And this was called a sophisticated regimen of meds. And I was seeing, top doctors. I had no ability, because of how medicated I was, to step back and think critically about this. And so I just assumed I'm just so fucking mentally ill. Like, what's the point in being alive anymore? And I eventually tried to kill myself because I just bought in so deeply to the fact that I was treatment resistant, mentally ill. I was just so sick that even their treatment couldn't help me.
And it's only going to get worse.
Exactly. And so what's
the
to
point?
Me, that didn't feel like a life worth living. And I actually see the logic in that decision I made. It was a bullshit story that I'd believed. And I do think many, many, many people out there right now have been told the same thing and just haven't yet clicked with this aha moment of, what if it's not treatment resistant mental illness that's making me worse? What if it's the treatment?
Folks, there is one and only one product that I was happy to do a sponsored episode with, because that's how much I believe in what they're producing, and that's Just Thrive Probiotics. So probiotics, if you've had stomach issues, I struggled with them for a long time. I had a friend who had Crohn's, coworker, I wouldn't call him a friend, and he said, just try this. And I did, and my issues were resolved very quickly. And I had thought, this is how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. I just have issues with digestion. If this sounds similar to what you're going through, please, I'm begging you, go to justthrivehealth.com, use promo code WELCOME, and you get 20% off risk-free. If you don't like it, full product refund. I'm telling you, stomach issues are something that affect every aspect of your life, and you don't know what it's like to feel normal. And now I can eat whatever I want and still maintain my underwear physique at the best of times, not always. They also have a new product called Just Thrive Digestive Bitters. And these are capsules that have 12 bitter herbs, which are clinically proven to wake up your digestive system so you don't have any bloat, burps, and comfortable digestion like when you're younger. So if you're interested in their digestive bitters, in their probiotics, and some of their other great products, I love this company. I use this company. Go to justthrivehealth.com. Use promo code WELCOME. You get 20% off. Your health is worth it. Being able to have a good relationship with food is such an important thing, and I'm so grateful that I found probiotics when I did. I wonder whatever happened to that guy. I'm sure he's fine. Anyway, justthrivehealth.com, promo code WELCOME, 20% off. And thank you, Just Thrive, for all the great work that you do and for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back to the show. I think it's very, very scary because it's all well and good to tell people, and I think that's true, that mental illness should be destigmatized. And if someone suffers from like depression or anxiety, they should be able to talk about it, maybe help other people. Hey, this worked for me. What worked for you? And I think there's a lot of good to be had in that. But at the same time, that's all well and good. If someone is internally thinking, I'm only getting worse and worse and worse, stigma or otherwise, I don't really care. I'm just looking at this long corridor that's just going to get narrower and narrower. And what's the whole point if I've got teams and no matter what they do and I'm following the rules and I'm trying my best, this is very scary to hear. And I'm sure it's scary for you to think about as well, because there's other Lauras out there who didn't have whatever quality you had to take a step back, and they're lost, and it's unnecessary, and their families don't know what to do. Their families are just trying their best as well. And can you talk about those 5 you were on and what effects each one has? Because I think there's this also Because what happens to any of these medications, if you Google them, you'll find like 50 Reddit posts or threads about like, okay, this is the side effect I'm having. Is anyone else having this? Are you having this? They all or very commonly have some side effect, and it's never like, okay, you know what? You're gonna wear a crutch to heal your leg, but you're not gonna be able to walk around. It's just like we're gonna put you in a crutch, and then you're wondering why you can't walk. It's like there's no, I feel like there's not this information that's being told. This is the upside, but there is going to be a downside to it.
Yeah. Well, and even the phrase side effect is misleading because it implies there's a primary main effect of the drug.
Sure.
And then, oh, this weight gain and diarrhea is just a little side effect. That's actually, it's actually just marketing language. All of these effects are adverse effects. It's just any ones that fall outside of what the drug is marketed for, they call side effect, which of course diminishes this, it makes you kind of think of it as a less significant thing. But the effects that these drugs have, not just on the brain, but on the entire body,
Yeah,
because
that's
of
right.
course, we are not physically compartmentalized. Everything is interconnected, and these neurotransmitter systems like serotonin and dopamine and GABA that these drugs are primarily target. They aren't just it's not just the brain that is
Yeah,
run by
that's
these
right.
neurotransmitter systems. It's the gut. It's everything. And so we are taught in large part because of this medicalized language around these drugs, and because of we call them antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers. We those words shape how we
That's
conceptualize
right.
them, and it distorts the ability to really think holistically about what they're doing. And so to your question about the 5 drugs that I was on at the end and like how they were affecting me, I mean, it's all so muddled together that the polypharmacy, I can really only say this is what polypharmacy did to me, because I don't know which drug did what. But by the time I was on 5 drugs in my mid 20s, my weight had fluctuated 70 pounds. I had chronic pain, like achy joints, chronic headaches. My hair was falling out all the time. I had flaky nails. Um, I had serious cognitive issues. I couldn't remember things. Word recall was difficult. I had zero sexual function, and this is a really critical uh, issue that is finally, I think, getting more recognition in our culture. The first orgasm I ever had was in my late 20s after I came off of these drugs.
Oh my
I
God.
had no sexual function whatsoever on them. SSRIs in particular are notorious
Yes.
for interfering with sexual function. And when you think about what that means for any human being, but especially for a teenager, an adolescent, a young adult, where so much of who you are and who you're becoming is rooted in your like erotic like that energy, not just when it comes to actual sex, but creativity and how you
Yep.
socialize and build friendships and appreciate beauty. All of those things were completely dampened for me by these drugs. And so what that meant is that my capacity to feel bonded and connected to other
Oh
human
my God.
beings was like gone.
Which
And
is
I
going
was
to add to depression and anxiety as well.
totally.
Of
And then
course.
those behaviors, like my MO, and and I go into this in the book, my MO was to get shit-faced and blow a bunch of coke, because that was the only time when I actually felt anything. And so inevitably, I'd like hook up with guy, and it would be this big intense thing, and I'd be like, "Wow, I'm feeling something," and then in the aftermath, I'd be like, "I don't feel anything," and then I would drop the poor guy. And so to my psychiatrists, this looked like promiscuity and borderline behavior and all these bullshit, pathologizations. But when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, my entire being was suppressed and I was just so disconnected. Of course, had so-called substance use problems. And of course I was hooking up with
Self-medicating.
a guy. Yeah, I was completely shut down, not realizing it was the meds, thinking it was me and being told it was me. And when you think at scale, 1 in 4 Americans, that's almost, by my calculations, 2022 numbers, that's like 65 million people are on these drugs right now. I'm not saying everyone is having this experience,
Yeah.
but some percentage are. And how many of them have no idea?
So when it finally happened, it must have been like an airbag, huh?
Oh my God. You're talking about the orgasm, right?
Yes. For 27 years. It must have been
Well,
almost scary because you don't know what it is.
yeah, and I talk about this in the book because, and I'm gonna get so emotional. I cry all the time. I fucking love crying. Whenever it
Because you
emerges in
feel
me,
something.
totally, I'm alive. I'm
Yes.
fucking here. The first thing that happened after I had that first orgasm was I I was struck with grief. Like, how did I miss
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah. It's pretty
How was
great.
this taken from me?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is great. And just, to one thing that's really important to know is that for some people, especially on SSRIs, there's a group of a population of people, we don't know the numbers because this is very understudied, who don't even necessarily lose sexual function on SSRIs, but when they stop,
Oh.
they lose it. And then for some people, it doesn't appear to be coming back. And it's called PSSD, post SSRI sexual dysfunction. And there's a whole community online of people who are living with zero sexuality, especially people who had it and now have lost it since they've stopped their med. It's serious. I mean, when you think about what that means for them and their own families and relationships, and then just culturally, all the art that's not being made and all the music that's not being written and all the, fun and jokes, and just because people are so disconnected from this erotic life force. Like,
Yeah.
this is huge.
I had a friend who's a shrink. He moved from California to Texas because I think gender dysphoria is real, but there's a law in California that if you're a shrink and you're going to in any way try to steer a kid away from having the diagnosis of having gender dysphoria, they'll go for your license. And
Mm,
it's like, okay, before I put you young girl on a testosterone or a boy on estrogen, hormones, which in any other context, which are steroids or women are pregnant, their brains are all over the place, let's talk. Maybe you're having body issues. Maybe you don't feel comfortable in your own skin. Like, we can hit that hormone in like 6 months. So it's just also, and the thing is, of course, when they go on these hormones, they do lose. If a male on estrogen, he's going to lose sexual function and he'll be impotent. So it's just. This isn't, I didn't even know this until you said this, and I consider myself a well-informed layman on the subject. And there's no way that these kids or adults who are told, hey, let's give this a shot, are told, by the way, you might lose something that allows you to pair bond, which
yep.
is so essential to being a human being.
Yep. Yep. And this all gets back to informed choice. If you are
Right.
not being given this information up front, you're not making a true choice. Because if you don't have reliable information about the treatment option you're considering, and if you also don't have information about alternatives to it that you
Right.
could try, then you're not choosing. It's coercion at best. And I think, the thing that this is raising in me is just this, and I feel so strongly about this because I was like that person who didn't stop to think through the long-term consequences here.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
and I want to pause for a minute just to say, when you are overwhelmed by pain, by emotional pain, and you are exhausted from trying to find resolution of it, and then here you are presented with, this, oh, you just have this condition. That's why you're not bad, you're not lazy, you're not a fuck up.
Right.
This isn't about your character. There's something wrong with your brain, and that's why you feel this way. And here's a solution. Here's a pill. I mean, I remember internalizing that and just feeling this flood of relief and
Yeah.
hope
Yeah. Yeah.
and a sense of validation and understanding. Like, I finally know why I feel this way. And, oh, thank God, I'm going to get relief. And so I want to, really respect the power that can have for people, that it had for me. And at the same time, because I was so desperate for relief, I wasn't in a place where I could think through the
Yeah.
consequences
Right. Right.
and play it out, especially when I was a kid, but even in my, early young adulthood. And one thing that no one told me, and I'm curious, Michael, like, you might know the answer to this, but if you were going to guess how long your average psychiatric drug is studied, in terms of its safety and efficacy
Oh, no.
before it gets approved? What would you guess?
Oh god, it's oh god, well, I obviously, the way you're setting up the question, because it's I'm gonna before I respond to that, I have friends who are investors in, like, health research, and they're telling me that they have cures right now for different kinds of cancers, but because the FDA process for them is so onerous, the new drugs are most like spins on other drugs. So we have cures just sitting there, but because the human trials are so complex, so I would hope it's something similar to that, but given how you frame the question, I'm guessing it's not. And how could you have really good data unless you're looking at many, many people over many, many years, because the brain is so complex, because human beings are so individual. And also, just our diets are so different. So if you're someone who's eating a lot of sugar and I'm someone who's eating like carnivore, that's going to affect my cognition as well. So I'm scared it's something like 5 years, right?
6 to 8 weeks.
No, you're like, are you serious?
I'm fucking serious. That's the average length of a trial to assess the safety and effectiveness of a psychiatric drug
Oh my
before it gets
god.
approved. Sometimes when I so for my in my book, because it's memoir, but I weave in a lot of
Sure.
research into the book too, because I wanted to contextualize my own story in this broader story of American psychiatry. And so I dove into the drug labels for most of the drugs I was on. I mean, if I count the whole list, it was like 20, around 20. So it was an extensive endeavor, but I picked a few in particular. And I looked at the drug labels, some of which are, 50, 60 pages. And it shocked me to realize that these drugs are approved on the basis of like 2 or 3 trials that will be handpicked by the drug company, and the rest are kind of discarded that they don't like. And yeah, 6 to 8 weeks is the average. But for Ambien, as an example, which I was
Oh my
on for a
god.
while, one of the 3 trials that it was approved on the basis of lasted one night, and it was conducted on people who didn't even have insomnia, but it was just assumed that because they would be in a sleep lab, they would have sleep disruption, and then they were followed for one night. That was one of the 3 trials that the drug was approved on. And no one told me this. No one is telling anyone this. And so these drugs have zero safety and efficacy evidence base for long-term use. They are only intended for short-term use.
Yeah.
Yet, as we're talking about, so many of us are on them for the long haul, not realizing that we are literally this is an experiment. There's no evidence base. And similarly, there's no evidence base for polypharmacy. So when I was on lithium, Lamictal, Effexor, Abilify, and Ativan at the same time, that was literally, there was no evidence base for that.
Right.
And most people are at this point on more than one, because the prescription cascade is almost
Yes.
inevitable. and
Uh,
and no one knows this.
but here's the other thing is that, yeah, they're for short-term use, but also if you stop, it's not gonna be easy. You're going to have withdrawal. It's like, "Wait a minute, I'm feeling worse. I better get back on."
You are nailing what I think is the linchpin issue here, which is that all psychiatric drugs, when taken regularly for any length of time, can cause physical dependence.
Yeah.
This is different than addiction. It's not like you're having a craving for your Prozac. It's purely physiological. Your central nervous system will change how it functions, its structure. It changes to accommodate the presence of this psychoactive chemical. And so when you try to stop it, as you said, if you stop it too quickly, that will cause a profound disruption in your entire body, and manifests in ways beyond mental and emotional. Like, you can have tons of physical issues too. And you have nailed it, because dependence is almost unrecognized as across all these drug classes. It's recognized for benzodiazepines, but really it's often not recognized for the other drug classes. When people stop these drugs and they feel horrible, they're told, "Oh, you're having a relapse.
Yeah, right.
See, this is why you need your med."
Right.
And so people think, "Oh my God, I don't want, if this is how I'm going to feel off my meds, then of
Right.
course I'm going to
Of
go
course.
back on." And then that becomes the the logic that enables years, even decades of people on them, because they think to themselves, "I don't like how I feel when I don't take my meds, which must mean I need my meds." And this is what most of my work is about. I go into this a lot in the book, but when I came off of these drugs, I didn't know any of this. So I came off 5 drugs in about 6 months, which is basically cold turkey.
Yeah.
And it was unspeakable. And I really only made it through because I happened to be born into a family who could take care of me.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
couldn't function, I couldn't work. I was a mess for years. And finally, when I really did recover from pharmaceutical trauma, which is what what it was, I realized, holy shit, if that was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life and I had access to all of these
Yeah, right,
resources,
right.
what is it like for people who have to hold down a job and they're single parents and the lights are going to go off if they miss a day of work? I mean, holy shit. And so I made my work focus primarily on not pushing people to come off of these drugs. People paint me as that all the time. It's like their way to discredit me, oh, Laura Delano tells people to stop drugs. No. But if you decide for yourself that you don't want to take these drugs anymore, you have a right to know how to get off them as safely as possible. And right now, the mental health system has no fucking idea how to do that. You have to go to lay people who've done it themselves and figured out the hard way how to do it. And there's this whole community of us who are helping each other taper off safely, which for some people takes years. I'm not even kidding, years of tapering to avoid withdrawal symptoms. It is crazy.
What was the moment when you realized that, you know what, I'm gonna be able to handle not being on them, I'm not gonna have to go back?
I mean,
Because
I don't know.
there's a
Yeah.
part of your brain that's telling you, you don't have to feel this way. In
Mm.
5 minutes, if you just took these 5 pills, you could be yourself again, and it's that voice is always there the whole time you're trying to wean yourself off.
Well, I think what helped me, ironically, is that the drugs never actually helped me feel better. So I
Okay.
felt miserable on them. And so the way I the way I was thinking about it was, just to back up for a minute, what led me to come off of these drugs in the first place was a few things. First, it was coming up against a side of the mental health industry that I had never experienced before, which is the power that mental health professionals have to strip you of your civil liberties. So I was forced into a hospital. I was forced to take a drug I didn't want to take. Police were called on me when I was too tranquilized to go to a therapy appointment, and my therapist called them to do a so-called wellness check. I had these really fucked up experiences with psychiatric force. This was back in 2010, I should say. So I was in my late 20s at this point. Those experiences dislodged this faith that I had had in all
Yeah.
of these doctors. Oh, they're here to take care of me and help me feel better. I'm like, no, they're about fucking controlling me. I just didn't see it before because I had always said yes. And now that I'm saying no, I'm seeing for the first time like what this is actually also about. And so that was what sparked my critical thinking. It was like, my God, if how did I not see this before? And not long after, I found a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic by a journalist named Robert Whitaker. And he looked at the evidence base for long-term use of these drugs and basically found it's super fucking shoddy. And actually, there's a case to make that long-term use of psychiatric drugs is, on the whole, making us sicker collectively in mind, body, and spirit. So that was my aha moment. And that was what planted this idea in me that if, up until now, I'd been thinking my life is either psych wards and disability and dependence and, treatment resistant mental illness or suicide. Like those are my 2 options. But if what this guy is saying is true and my treatment's been fucking me up, maybe there's another way for me. And so I knew then that I had to find out what my true baseline was. Like I'd been on these drugs since I was a kid. I had no idea who I was off of them. And so I knew I would never go back to taking them. To get to your question, like there's something broke in me, that faith that I'd had in the mental health industry broke in me. And I knew even if I ended up eventually myself, I would never go back to being a psych patient for me personally. And so I was determined to find find out who I was off of these drugs. And that's what helped me hang in there through the
Yeah.
withdrawal, through all the pain and uncertainty and overwhelm. I just knew I had to keep going. And it did eventually start to get better, but it took a long time, and it took an act of faith in myself and my body. And thank God I had the support system I had around me, because it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Hey, it's James Altucher. I've been an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling writer, stand-up comic, and whatever it is I'm interested in, I get obsessed. Yes, it's led to success, but it's also led to such heartbreaking failure. I have failed more times than I can count. I wish in my life I had people to talk to. That's why I started the James Altucher Show and bring on some of the most brilliant minds in every area of life. People like Richard Branson, Sarah Blakely, Mark Cuban, Danica Patrick, Gary Kasparov. And I wanted to find out exactly how they've navigated the highs, the lows, and everything in between. No fluff, just raw stories and real advice. I've talked to 1,500 of the most amazing people on the planet. So if you want to learn from the best and skip the same old canned interviews, we're all about helping you find your next big idea, level up your thinking, and ultimately to choose yourself. So let's do this together. Subscribe now to The James Altucher Show.
Let's get back to the show. I had an epiphany once, and I think this kind of helps people understand what this is like. I was at the gym, and I had one more set to do, right? And my brain's telling me, go home, you need to write. And the set's going to take under 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh, this is my body being tired and reaching its limit. And it's using my brain to tell me what it needs to tell me to preserve the resources of calories or energy, right? I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So when people are going through withdrawal or tapering off, their brain is very articulate, and it's very hard to distinguish between this is me and this is the body talking, telling me what it needs to tell me to get back on what it needs. Can you, as best you can, explain to people what that process feels like mentally?
Oh, that's such an interesting point. Well, the way I talk about it, and a lot of other people do too, is there's the withdrawal mind.
Yeah.
And when you're in the throes of withdrawal symptoms, and just to be clear, this is why tapering is so important, because people are able to come off of these drugs without debilitating withdrawal symptoms. But if you're someone who didn't have good information and you came off too fast, or you're coming off too fast and you're in withdrawal, and your mind is telling you all this crazy shit, like it's all over for you, you're fucked, kill yourself or go back on the meds, or what I found helpful for myself and what I share with other people is, if the thought is coming from a place of fear, it's worth, welcoming it in, but not necessarily believing what it's telling you.
Yeah.
And so people will in the withdrawal community do end up having to get really good at creating a separation between them and their thoughts, because the thoughts are fucking debilitating, the most dark, twisted, terrifying thoughts. And often it is when people lose that separation that they end up, unfortunately, a lot of people, I know so many people who've taken their lives in withdrawal because they lost hope. And so what I think a lot of this comes down to is re-embodiment, because the mind is, I don't trust like 98% of the thoughts that circulate through my head on any given day. I'm primed to be paranoid and distrustful. I overanalyze everything. And for me, it's about like just getting better and better at not taking my thoughts so seriously most of the time. And then also coming back into my body.
Yeah.
And because these drugs disembody us and they dismember and disconnect us, this is about re-embodiment, reconnection, remembering. And the more I can shift my attention off of what's happening in my head and like onto my breath or the feeling of the sunlight on my cheek, that I think helped me find my way through the darkest hours, and as did looking to other people who were further down the path than me. And that's where mutual aid becomes so important. Like you said a while ago, like when you're really depressed, turning to someone who's had their own dark night of the soul and moved through is sometimes way more helpful than sitting in front of some like sterile clinician who's like running a checklist on you, and you don't know anything about them.
I'm curious if you've reached out to any of these shrinks who've medicated you over the years or sent them your book and how they've reacted.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I write about that a bit in the book. One psychiatrist in particular, whom I saw the longest, I care about her a lot to this day. She was who I was seeing when I tried to kill myself. We went through a lot together. I write about trying to reconnect with her about what happened, trying to make sense of it together, and what a hard time I had
Yeah, yeah.
getting time with her because I think she was really afraid. Um, in terms of my actual book, I haven't heard from a single former therapist or psychiatrist, which hurts my heart because I wrote this book I wrote it with a lot of care for mental health professionals. What happened, I do not think these are bad people for the most part. I think these are misled people who are broken down at themselves, disembodied, maybe even
Yeah. Yeah.
themselves. And I wanted my book to feel like an invitation to come to the table and talk about this. Like, clearly more people are suffering than ever before at the same time as more people than ever
Right.
before are getting psychiatric treatment. Like, something's not working here. This isn't about we need more treatment for people. We have plenty of treatment for people. That's not the problem. And I want my book to bring people together to talk about this and, like, what do we do if this isn't working, which I don't think it is? Where do we go from here? And I think the fact that there's so many people who are pissed at me for writing this book tells me I'm over the mark.
Yeah.
There are a lot of angry people, including patients
Sure.
who write horrible things about me on the internet, and I just remind myself, like, they're afraid too. This is a threatening. My story feels like a threat to them, and I don't want it to. I want it to feel like an invitation to think and question and be curious.
Yeah, because a lot of times when people are on these meds, they told themselves, "I've tried everything." And you're the one telling them, "No, no, 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 there's one more thing you can try." And that is very scary because then you have to question this whole path you've been on for so many years. And as soon as you start going off that path, it's not going to feel good. So that's data telling them, no, no, this lady doesn't know what she's talking about. I got to hop back on. So, and they also don't have proof that you're right for them.
Yep.
Right. So it could be that it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. So
Yep.
this is the kind of thing where there's like a lot of trial and error, and everyone's different, and it's a very scary. Mental health is such a scary thing because you can't get out of your head. The brain
Yep.
is always there. So and it doesn't tell you what it wants, or sometimes when people are especially guys. I have guy friends. When your guys are depressed, they want to isolate, which is like the worst thing. Instead of hanging out with your buddies and being like, you're not alone, you have people who care about you, who are going to call you homophobic slurs because they love you. And that's part of being a guy. And that's fun. And you're right, you're laughing because you can laugh. You're not
Yep.
a lost cause, but it's hard to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
And
it
also,
is.
I wish I could give credit to the person who said, if they have a name for it, it's not unique to you. But people who
Mm.
struggle with mental issues think no one knows how I feel. No one can understand this. And it's ridiculous because lots of people have depression, anxiety, even worse than you. So I think I really wish more people were in a position to at least consider what it is you're saying.
Yeah, and to go back to what you were saying a while ago about, anti-stigma and this idea that we should be able to talk about how hard it is to be
Yeah.
alive. I completely agree, and I think what's unfortunate about the kind of pharma-funded anti-stigma mental health awareness campaigns is that they take that very important message that to be human is to struggle,
Yeah.
and we should be able to connect with one another about this. They take that and then they commodify it and they medicalize it, and they kind of take it a step further to say there's no shame in seeking treatment and getting treatment. That's really what it's about. It's not about, for these campaigns, it's not about there's no shame in talking about your struggles. It's there's no shame in getting on psych meds. Like that's really what these campaigns are about. So how can we reclaim that deeper message and really embrace how fucking hard it is to be alive sometimes,
Yeah.
and that the more we wear our pain on our sleeve, the less power this industrialized mental health, vortex will have over us, because that illusion that you're alone in this, that no
Yeah.
one knows what you're going through, is what fuels, this monolithic industry of commodified, professionalized, pharmaceuticalized so-called care. But when you realize it's you are not alone in this, then that opens up the opportunity to connect with your neighbor or your cousin or someone in your church or your synagogue. And the more people realize, like, wow, it actually feels really fucking good to connect with friends and fellows, then you're like, I don't think I need to go pay some random professional to dump all my stuff on, because I actually have meaningful relationships. Because at the heart of this is, what does it mean to be human? Like, what does it mean to suffer? And is medicalizing our suffering and professionalizing what we think help is really the best way to go about this here?
I'm not trying to get political, but because this is a bipartisan, nonpartisan issue that affects everyone in every walk of life. What do you think of RFK and the whole Maha movement? Is that something that you've been following at all? I'm sure you get asked this a lot.
I've been following it, and yeah, I feel when it comes to the mental health issue, I feel really optimistic that the new administration is eager and open and ready to kind of like revisit the evidence base for psychiatric medications and explore alternatives. And I was encouraged by the Maha Commission report that came out back in May. That was, basically my sense of it is that it was mapping out the key areas that HHS believes are at the heart of the childhood chronic disease epidemic. And one of them was psychiatric medicalization and over-medication of children, which I care deeply about.
Yeah,
and so I was really excited to see that. And I feel more optimistic than I've ever felt that our government and kind of established health authorities are open to thinking, to asking more questions about this issue. And this should not be political.
right.
Like, I mean, I'm called a right-wing fascist like all the time for talking about coming off psych drugs. I'm accused. There's one great, I love it. I get it sometimes, where my book is being used by the new administration as a justification to cut services to people who need services. I'm like, really? That's an interesting claim.
Yeah. No.
This should not be political. We all struggle.
I think they call you a right-wing fascist because you have Ann Coulter hair, but they don't realize that's by law for people from Connecticut. So it's not your choice.
I also have a squash racket and a tennis racket.
But a pickleball.
An all-white outfit. I have yet to play pickleball, but my father-in-law is obsessed with it. I'll probably get into it. No, dude, I'm a Greenwich girl, grew up playing squash. I played squash at fucking Harvard, okay? I went to boarding school, like all whites, squash tournaments. That I am the stereotype. You can make fun of it as much as you want. I love it.
I was at a bar with a bunch of people talking to some dude, and I just go, where in Connecticut you're from? He's like, Darien. And he didn't even he didn't even realize what I was doing. And my friend's like, how'd you know that? I'm like,
Totally. I used to lie about being from Greenwich, and then I was like, you're not tricking anyone.
You're not passing. But I mean, I'm going to say something serious. It must feel good to be able to laugh and to laugh at yourself, because that's something else that a lot of these, when they numb you, yeah, you're going to lose the lows, but you also lose the highs. When you say mood stabilizer, that also means you don't get excited. Yeah. And sometimes, yes, it's bad to be crying hysterically, but it's also, you have that, like, oh my God, something wonderful happened, or the possibility of something wonderful happen. You lose that sense of hope and that spark, and it's a very scary thing to numb the human mind.
Oh, it's so true. You can't have, you need the shadow and light. They need each other, and I think at the heart of it is, we live in this consumerist age where we are constantly being bombarded with the message that if you feel discomfort, this is a problem you need to fix. Like, buy this, drink this, eat this, take this, do this. And to, what for me, nothing has been more liberating than learning how to just sit with myself.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't mean in some like woo-woo, oh, meditate. I mean, just sitting with myself and letting it all wash over me and realizing it's temporary, it passes, it changes. And when I clicked with that, when I realized I don't have to actually be afraid of my pain, I need to feel it and learn how to be with it and listen to what it's telling me. Because sometimes it's telling me like, dude, stop eating fucking nasty, like a whole bag of chips that you always feel shitty after you eat,
Right,
and get
right.
outside. But sometimes it's telling me like there's a lot to grieve right now. Like all
Yeah,
these young people growing up therapeuticized, like, Abigail Schreier's book, Bad Therapy.
yeah.
I was the beginning of that phenomenon that is now ubiquitous. Like the TikTok culture where the more labels you have in your bio, the cooler you are. I feel so much grief about that. And when that grief washes over me, like I don't want to get rid of it. I want to feel it and channel it into my writing and my work. And I think that's what this is all about. Like the fear we have of discomfort and pain, and coming back into relationship with it is, to me, where all the power and freedom lie, not, trying to get rid of it.
I'd give the short version, the long version. Short version, you tell yourself this too shall pass. And the
Yep.
long version is, it's 2025. I had to check. Imagine going in time 10 years ago and talking to yourself and all the concerns you had and things you were freaking out about. This applies to everybody. And some of those awful things came true and some of them didn't. But 10 years later, you're here to tell yourself, I'm here. Like you got
Yeah.
through it. Now you can imagine yourself in 2035 going back. And it's what you're going through right now might suck and might think it's the worst thing ever, but you are strong enough to handle it. And once you've been through it once, the second time it's like, oh, I know what it's like childbirth, I can imagine, right? Like the
Oh
second time,
yeah.
it's like, I know what this is. It's not this nightmare process. Well, one thing I really want to curious to know, there are parents who are universally guilted when they go to see that shrink and they're told, if you don't put your kid on this, you're a bad parent. You don't care about your kid. You're choosing them to be miserable and unhealthy. And how, like, basically, how dare you? Why'd you bring him in here at all? And it's a very powerful message to tell a
Yep.
parent. And I can see why any parent would be like, what do I know? What would you tell those parents to do?
Oof. I have the chills thinking about it, because
Right?
and
You
it's
were there. It
happening in
happened to your
schools
parents.
too. Teachers telling
Oh,
their
yeah, that's
parents,
right. That's
basically, your
another
kid's
one.
not welcome back until they're on Ritalin. I think the message I would say is no one knows your child better than you do. And do not let any expert, no matter how many letters they have after their name, convince you out of that deep, deep intuition that you have as a parent. And then I would say, as much as you can stay in a place of curiosity about your kid's
Yeah,
struggle, however terrifying and overwhelming and draining and scary and all of it might be, the more you can stay curious, the more that will open up, a wide array of options for understanding why this is happening, because there is a reason why, and it's not because there's some faulty brain chemistry in your kid's brain. It's about the relationship your kid has to the world around them. And it could be something as simple as diet, and they removing gluten and dairy will help. It
that's
could
right.
be something way more complicated and mysterious that isn't going to be clear right away, but there's always a why. And it's never as simple as, oh, let's just fix your kid's chemicals with pills. And I think this is where mutual aid also is so important, because
Yep.
parents need other parents to turn to as mentors and guides and friends. I think a lot of parents, I feel for them, because the only sources of help they see are professionals
That's right.
who have their own, hammer with everything looking like a nail. And so
Right.
it's of the utmost importance that parents find each other and support each other and share stories of what's worked and what hasn't. But yeah, the allure of this quick fix solution coming in a pill is, may in the short term it could help, but just remembering, like, it's up to you to get informed about the evidence base or lack thereof. You can't rely on your doctor to tell you the information that you need to know. You have to take it upon yourself. And just to quickly make a plug to for the nonprofit that I
Please.
started years ago, Inner Compass Initiative. I started it because of this very thing. I realized my parents and I did not make informed choices at all. How can I take what I went through and turn it into something that might help someone else? And so our mission is to help people make more informed choices about all of it. We have tons of free information about diagnoses and meds and how diagnoses, come to be and how these drugs are brought to market. We have a community where people are supporting each other, sharing stories. Please come find us if you are one of these parents or you yourself are struggling. It's theinnercompass.org, and just, you are so far from alone. And there are a lot of people over there who are navigating this together.
And no matter what issue you're facing, mental or otherwise, don't you dare let anyone make you feel guilty for doing research and taking an active interest in your health and well-being under any circumstances. That is insane.
Yep.
And get a second opinion. And when you see that second expert is different from the first expert, all of a sudden it's not there's not a consensus. And it's how much is that going to cost? $100 for another set? I don't know what rates are these days anyway.
Oh, way higher than that. For
okay, but sure, that's fair. But point being, in anything, like, take an active interest. This is your life. Don't outsource your well-being to somebody else blindly when the internet and so many resources out there for stuff like this, like your nonprofit. I think it's just absolutely wonderful. And God bless you for God bless you for being here, because as you know, there's other Lauras out there who aren't here. And that was something that's very avoidable, something I think about a lot. I'm working on next year on a project, something to do with this. And it's just, I'm just very gladdened when I hear people who come out the other end and are like, it didn't have to be that way. And the best thing that you can do is be a cautionary tale.
Yeah. And just as a hope, to leave people with some hope, like, what the struggles you're in right now are full of meaning. And what you were saying earlier, when you look back 10 years ago and 10 years from now, and you look back, the things that are the hardest obstacles, they, at least for me, they've brought in, moving through them has brought in so much beauty and friendship and creative opportunities and meaning and purpose. I wouldn't change a minute of anything that I went through, because going through that hellscape of psychiatrization gave me every meaningful friendship I have and my work and what drives me every day. And I do think knowing that you're suffering, the pain you're in, can become a catalyst.
Yes.
And this isn't to be woo-woo and like power of positivity bullshit. No, I'm not saying it's always true, but if you stay open to that possibility, and like you said, just move through and trust that this too shall pass.
Yeah.
So much lies ahead that you can't even imagine. Yeah.
Laura, running out of time. The new book is called Unshrunk. I cannot wait to read it. I have a copy on my desk. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Oh my gosh, good question. Well, honestly, the whole thing, just meeting you and being here. But if I was going to say, I think I laughed the hardest with the whole Fairfield County Greenwich WASP thing. Like, it always gives me a little boost of comedy to think about us old WASPs and down there and in Fairfield County. But honestly, meeting you and talking with you and just hearing how much you care about this issue. And and I hope we can stay in touch. And I want to hear more about the project you're working on next year too. So.
You are welcome.
Just when you thought summer couldn't get any hotter, Pluto TV is turning up the heat with thousands of free movies. Presenting Summer of Cinema. Stream your favorite blockbuster films like Gladiator.
I will have my vengeance.
Good Burger.
This is what I call fast food.
Beverly Hills Cop. The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. And Julie and Julia.
Bon appetit.
All for free on your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.